Hi all, welcome back to 3D's YouTube channel. I'm now here with Clifford, the head of ecosystem development and information security at Dynex, another 3D portfolio company. Dynex is arguably the world's fastest and most interesting quantum computing company, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's very, very interesting and they're doing great things. This results in massive cost and time savings as well as reduced complexity on that sort of stuff. So Clifford, please start by giving us a rough overview of the company and its founding, your background, etc.
Sure, absolutely. So my name was Clifford. I'm the head of ecosystem over at Dynex. My role encompasses quite a few different parts of the whole, but most of it is to do with educating users, making sure things are being delivered on time. From an information security perspective, I make sure that things are, being as secure as possible. We kind of think very outside of the box with some of our backgrounds. So obviously from a security perspective, thinking outside of the box is super important, right? To think of all the kind of different angles something could, could abuse the system. And that's really important to us, right? Because security, especially with the raw compute power, and we'll get onto that in a bit, but the raw capabilities of what Dynex can do require that certain high level understanding and high thought process around security. So my background's 20 years of cyber security. Obviously we're talking just off camera, but for the last 12 years, I've also been doing very large scale digital signage for some very large clients, and they came with some rather large security constraints around them. So understanding to think outside of the box is just par for the course for me. So, but yeah, I mean, and the other part of that question was tell us a bit of a background of Dynex, right? So Dynex has been around for nearly 4 years now. It actually was started 2 years before the blockchain side of our project, right? So we originally went with the concept of we would like to do this ourselves. Let's fundamentally work out if it can be done. We very quickly realized, yes, it can be done. Then it was a case of, well, how much is this going to cost to build out the infrastructure side? Quickly and thankfully, very quickly, the team realized that it wouldn't scale to the sizes that we would kind of need if we were going to make a true success of this.
Yeah.
Right? So we started researching other options to do this, and blockchain came across as the most logical because we can utilize all that resources that's on our network at any one time to be our infrastructure. So of course that's where that started off. And we started off with a very basic blockchain, and over the course of 18 to 20 months we've effectively rewrote everything near enough now.
Yeah, very, very impressive. And actually, one of the interviews I saw of you also engage heavily with your community. Your company's growing extremely fast. I noticed you were engaging with them because you had to make some of these decisions so you could integrate. And you got the community to vote on actually integration onto the blockchain, which is really, really cool as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we also obviously started off as a layer one privacy chain. We assumed that we would have to use that element to obviously benefit for privacy for our clients, right? What we quickly realized was actually we could do it in a much better way that would not only protect our clients, but allow us the transparency side.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that ourselves, though, we actually put it to the community vote. We explained the pros and cons of both sides of that. And obviously with MiCA being a big constraint in Europe where we're registered, obviously privacy tokens are really not very well liked or really wanted in Europe right now. So it kind of caused us a bit of well, we need to pivot now before MiCA kicks in like full time, and get ourselves compliant. So we put it to the community vote. The community understood why we were explaining it, and 2 weeks later, we deprivatized the network, and now we're 100% a transparent chain.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I love the transparency as well and involving the community. That's certainly what anyone really wants when they're back in a project. What's the easiest way to describe Dynex? What is Neuromorphic quantum computing.
Don't worry, I get asked this all the time, right? So neuromorphic quantum or just neuromorphic networks in general, right?
Yeah.
They are by definition biology inspired, right? We know pretty much without a doubt right now that the most powerful PC we've ever come across is the human brain. Its its capability to parallel process is literally, there is nothing like it out there yet.
Mhm.
Of course. So when we were looking at different mechanisms to develop our network around, there was obviously physics inspired, like a
Mhm.
physical quantum is inspired by physics.
Yeah.
We could have gone down a few different paths, but biology really kind of, with the way that how neuromorphic works, emulating biology, therefore it's the same process as what the human brain does. It gave us, I would say, more or less a lot more freedom to actually expand on that project set. We know that physical quantum
Mm.
computers are already done, right?
Yeah.
There's physical ones out there right now that have, varying success stories around them and varying degrees of that success, but they're still physically confined in a very niche market
Mm-mm.
because it's too expensive and you need tons of technical resources to actually have one of those things, right? We're not quite at room temperature quantum. That'll be the next big technology leap, I think, to be fair, when we finally solve the conundrum of room temperature quantum. But neuromorphic networks really lend themselves well because you can harness all that parallel processing. So much like, we're sitting here, we're listening, we're seeing stuff, we're smelling stuff. It's all autonomously done, right, with your brain. But
Mm-hmm.
you can do that same process of having one main task being run, but with a ton of sub processes all running at the same time
Yeah.
in parallel to actually speed up compute times. And
Mm.
obviously, in a day and age where when you're renting these kind of services on an hourly basis, if you can squeeze 5 times the amount of work in that same hour,
Mm.
then your cost per job drops drastically.
Mm. Mm.
Therefore, overall cost do as well.
Very, very fascinating. I love what you were saying about, biology and physics. I mean, these are already kind of perfect things, and you're just incorporating that
Exactly.
into this. I mean, there's another company that 3D have called Palatronica, a cybersecurity company, all physics based, and
Yep.
this is where you stand out. And I also liked how you just said about, um, multitasking, like a human's good at multitasking, but then if you can take that and then put it on a level where you don't need that, attention span or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very impressive. How does Dynex work? What differentiates you from other quantum computing companies?
Sure. So obviously physical quantum and similar or emulated quantum environments, right? So there's two different paths right now in the realm of quantum computers. There's physical, like IBM and a few others have, right? And D-Wave have got their own now as well. But primarily one of the bigger ones that we know about that are publicly available is IBM's. But they're still very limited on the amount of computation they have available,
Mm,
mainly because of the requirements, right? So I touched on it briefly, but you're talking, you need to chill it down to absolute zero, right? That takes a ton of liquid nitrogen, which includes a
yeah.
massive cost. Or you need to come up with some crazy concept of like super cool cooling water, which is practically impossible in that realm because it heats up so fast that you'd have burn off and it would be terrible. But um, or there's the other approach, which really D-Wave kind of pushed the boundaries on, which was simulated annealing, or an emulated quantum environment to simulate quantum algorithms. And those have two very different distinct paths, right? Because if you look at the number of qubits or the computational availability that they have, physical quantum tops out currently, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's like 1127, somewhere around that. And that's literally it.
Mhm.
Whereas D-Wave's simulated annealing has around 5 to 6,000 now qubits worth of computation. And then obviously there's Dynex, because we've just got such a large network. We have, I would safely say 7 figures in a qubit number. Yeah, it's a crazy number, right? Because we scale infinitely based on the size of our blockchain. So we run an entangled solution, proof of work, and what we dub proof of useful work, right? So what do I mean by proof of useful work, right? So a little bit of an understanding of how blockchains work is that you have a miner that is verifying the block hash, and that is proof of work.
Yeah.
Right? As long as that has consensus across the network, then that gets added to the ledger. Well, with proof of useful work, we're adding one more layer to that, which we can not only secure our network one side, but also run quantum calculations at the same time. Because we found a very unique way of balancing it so that the proof of work and the proof of useful work can't actually be done separate. They have to be done together.
That's very fascinating. I think the efficiency there, plus the extra layer, because obviously you can see wallet addresses, you can see hashes, but you can't actually you can't tell this is a good job or good piece of work. Just expanding on that efficiency. I mean, obviously you've got secret sauce, and you don't want to tell, give your competitors an advantage when you've already got an advantage over them. Is there any way you could describe how you're able to create that efficiency, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I can give it to you in a way that's not too worrisome. So basically, we have something called our job distributor. We also now have our job dispenser as well. So I'll break down both processes so that you can understand it, right? So a client comes to us and says, we want to run a quantum simulation or a quantum algorithm to see how well it runs. They submit the job to our system. They are either subscription or spot job, where they're paying in either fiat or normal currency, or they can pay in our native L1 token Dynex itself, DNX. So of course, depending on which method they come through, the mechanism is still the same. The job gets delivered to our job distributor. That uses some very complex IP that we've got. But in a nutshell, what it does is it works out how much resources is going to be required to run this job, then slices that job up into many different chunks, and then sends that across our network over our mining network. And after, some time, all that gets returned, and our job distributor will basically reconstitute that data as actual data and then hand it back to the client, whether that be routed direct to them, because we have that capability. So you take us out of the equation for returned data, especially for high level privacy. Like we always recommend that the customer sends their data direct to themselves. But obviously, if customers just want to be able to test stuff, they can just leave it on routing to us, and it will give them a URL that they can download their data from. But once that's all taken care of, our job dispenser is what then works out how much should be paid to our miners for that job, and adds it into our blockchain as add-on fees. So we've got what would be classified as a emission schedule, right? So effectively over time, that the amount of rewards that are given to our network are lowered every day. It's a diminishing emission schedule, right, which stops massive inflation on our network, which obviously is a good thing. So it's not quite, I wouldn't say it's quite deflationary, but it just stops mad inflation from happening, right? So what we're planning on doing, though, is as the jobs start now coming in, they take up the slack that the block reward would get. So effectively, there'll come a point where you've got us coming down from our normal actual emission schedule in our white paper, right? And then obviously the job amounts that we're being paid to miners as we onboard more and more clients go up. There'll be that full crossover where at that moment it will actually even itself out. And then effectively one will overtake the other one again, and we'll see our emissions will end in about 18 to 20 months, I believe.
Right.
And then our normal jobs will take up the rest of the payments.
Okay. Yeah.
So, um, and like I say, that is the whole ethos of what we're doing, right? It's a fully circular environment. So, money flows in,
Hmm.
gets distributed to our network, then that money gets obviously liquidated on exchanges, and then the exchanges are being purchased by our system as well, so that they can buy up some Dynex to be able to pay the miners again.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course, it's very circular.
Yeah.
We're definitely trying to prove that a circular system is possible
Hmm.
if you plan it correctly.
Hmm.
But there's been very few cases where circular ecosystems really can, take off in a blockchain sense. I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's only been 4 or 5 years now that we've really started seeing real world use cases being on blockchain. So not that I'm disagreeing that financials is not, a very much needed service on blockchain, but just I think there's more to come from blockchain in my own right. Like
Yeah.
I've been in it for 10 years. I
Hmm.
got in 2014 into blockchain. So I I see this as a natural evolution of what
Hmm.
blockchain can be. So doing more useful stuff, not just validating hashes, as it were.
Was also quite interesting at the beginning of that you were talking about payments in and you were talking about fiat, but that's so there's you can pay through different there's many different ways the
Yeah.
money it's not just through crypto. So perhaps you were a private company working just on fiat before, or I don't know, but that sounds quite impressive.
Well, I mean, obviously we have subscriptions and mechanisms with other jobs that our employees have of their own. Some of the leadership teams have other business interests as well. They're very familiar with fiat on ramps, right? But obviously, when you start adding blockchain and crypto into the equation, it takes a little bit of time to get all of the understanding around how each one interacts with each other very
Yeah.
differently. When you do crypto, you're waiting for 8 block confirmations, right? That's potentially 16 minutes, right?
Yeah. I think
So
that adds to your credibility as well, being both rather than just being in a crypto and blockchain project.
yeah, we understood
Adds
though that
hugely. Yeah.
enterprises weren't really going to want to deal with the crypto side, right? They're all about innovation and using the technology,
Mhm.
but actually paying with crypto, that's still a very gray area right now
Yeah.
for businesses. So to be safe around it so that then they're not got any compliance issues,
Mhm.
we thought that it would probably be a lot sensible to at least build a bridge for the moment, right? That
Yeah.
until there's clarity around how cryptocurrencies and businesses can interact like that,
Mhm.
it was safer to offer both.
Yeah. That's very impressive, and I can see how much trust that adds to your project over 90% of projects
Yeah,
on the blockchain. So yeah, very important for viewers to understand that, definitely.
yeah,
How scalable are you? You talked about a crazy number there. What's your talk about your impressive Q score, what that is?
yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know what the Q score is, at the moment that is like a almost de facto way of benchmarking quantum machines, right? Now, the Q score was built when there was only maybe like 500 qubit. It was the biggest quantum computer at the
Okay.
time. So, you know, it's a little unfair for us to run the Q score in some regards compared to like a physical, because we have a lot more available to us than most of the other companies, right? But
Mhm.
wanted to see where we would match up. It's good to always, benchmark your competition every now and again, and just to see where you actually, fall into line.
Mhm.
If we'd have been behind people, we would have known we'd needed to work more on something, right? If we're monumentally ahead, like we found out, it also shows us that the technology that we're building is viable,
Mhm.
and also lends itself to give it some very honest numbers around where we sit to the public, right?
Mhm.
So we want to turn around to everyone and say, oh, we're super efficient, we're super fast. And people go, well, can you prove it? Well,
Yeah.
you need to do these sort of benchmarks to find that out. Now,
Yeah.
we are kind of in the process of working out some benchmark tools ourselves that would be more capable of dealing with a network our size, to give a proper accurate score, because the Q score that we scored is actually capped. It wasn't able to count up that high because the original
That's amazing.
benchmark was never factored to go that high, right?
Yeah.
So it effectively capped out. And we believe we could retweak that so it's actually more accurate and would give a more usable number, right? Rather than like 15,000, which is kind of irrelevant if you're looking at it just from numbers perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We probably want to see if we can work with the other quantum companies and simulated annealers like D-Wave to come up with a more universal benchmark tool. And if any of those people are listening, like, I would love to reach out to any of those companies and come up with a solution that works out so we can actually do legitimate benchmarking.
Yeah.
Because the current ones are outdated. But that's why our Q score is so ginormous, because nobody ever factored in somebody trying to do simulated annealing on a scale our size.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
what was your Q score? And just for you, this is just an
so it
efficiency
capped
score.
out at 15,000,
15,000.
whereas
Yeah.
everything else was in the like 1800s was
Yeah.
the second highest. So
Wow.
I mean, it does go to show that we have raw capability there in abundance, right? But again, we think that we should probably look at building a better benchmark tool now.
Yeah. No one else has capped out as well. I mean, D-Wave or anyone like that.
D-Wave came close, I think, when they ran their simulated annealing Q score. I think theirs was like 2,000 or 3,000, which was still, to this day, was considered like way beyond what a physical quantum could manage to keep up with. So of course, then we come along and put in a score that big. It kind of got questions asked.
Dear me, yeah.
That's what we're here to do, right? We're not, we classify ourselves as disruptive technology. So of course, the only way to be disruptive technology is if you're disrupting things. So
even the measurement,
yeah,
very impressive. And I'll tag these other companies in the back end of this video, so hopefully some of their people will see this. What are some of the, linking directly to that, what are then some of the use cases and results even from those who have used the platform?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably where I get the most enjoyment of talking to interviewers, right, like yourself, is that when we start getting into the use cases, because a lot of people might think of a few that you can naturally think of, like medical industry, right? Pharmaceutical industries, those kind of big players who do massive simulation data and compute day long, right? Classifying out new drugs, repurposing of drugs, protein folding, RNA sequencing. There's a bunch of really cool items on that list in that sector alone. And we've got plenty of showcase pieces on our website to showcase those things. Yeah. But it's, for me, the interesting ones are the ones that you necessarily might not think of, right? So automotive industry, doing CFD or computational fluid dynamics. And what that is how wind and air effectively interact with an object, right? So I assumed that was maybe not possible, but given that it's an optimization issue of where this wind is going and how it's interacting with that object, you can fundamentally start to think of it more like an optimization problem, and therefore you definitely can run it in a quantum realm. But it was a fascinating bit of research. Like, I came to Dynex with an idea of doing a virtual wind tunnel effectively. Wow. What we ended up with was more than just a virtual wind tunnel. We built a whole ton of plugins for CFD software. So it's not just compatible with one software, it's compatible with a few, and there's still more to be added yet. So that's fascinating. But also LLM research on quantum is massive. No one's done a quantum LLM yet, or none that are commercially viable, should I say? Because there's probably been people that have tried, and they've probably run up to the headroom and head headed for the hills, basically, because they see how much resources are required to do LLMs in quantum. Realize, oh my God, there's maybe only 2 companies in the world that have that capability right now. And both are not physical quantum. Because
what's an LLM, just for viewers?
So an LLM is a large language model. It's what fundamentally underpins ChatGPT.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So it's all the data sets, all the
There'll be a lot
heuristic
there.
side of it, and how it works that stuff out. But obviously, when you start getting into quantum, the calculations start getting ridiculous, for one, and the inherent data that it's trying to understand is not quite designed for a quantum space. So we have to build translation layers. So Sam, our head of quantum architecture, he recently put out a video on NLP, or natural language processing. And that's the part where, if you've ever used ChatGPT, when you ask it a question and then you get that little spinning icon and then suddenly it starts talking to you, right?
Yeah.
Well, with quantum NLP, there is no wait. It's like us 2 talking right now.
Dear me, that shows where AI communication can get to.
Yeah, it's really going to be scary in the next couple of years when that sort of stuff is readily available, and you won't know whether you're talking to somebody digitally, as in a quantum NLP, or some kind of AI processing, or a real person, because the difference will be so small that you're going to need a PC to detect whether it's real or a computer talking to you. So it's
the physical attributes of the person would be the only way to distinguish.
Yeah, and it's going to get crazy like a few more years after that, because it's just going to be practically impossible. So, but that's just another sector that is fascinating from a research perspective, because we don't really have much in the way to go on in relative terms of how to build this, right? There's nobody else building one, not that we know of, or at least publicly that we know of, right? And if there is somebody out there who is doing one, then I would love to speak to them as well, because I'm pretty sure they've probably hit some, very big roadblocks like we have. About how to do that in a quantum space. So, of course, we showed off NLP. That's one part. So we broke our LLM system out into 7 parts, right? And we're about part 5 now of 7, and we hope to have the rest out by the end of the year, to do our very first quantum LLM. And that's going to need a lot of peer review still. We've got to have proper people with the right backgrounds having a look at this thing, making sure that our code is legit, the output is legit, that it's actually doing what it says it's doing and not faking it. Because we've seen that a lot of the times, right, with other AI projects that have come along in the past, right? They say it's all doing it, and they're all doing it themselves, and then you look in the code and they're just fundamentally borrowing OpenAI's APIs to do it. And you're like, well, that's really not AI then that you're doing. You're just building a front end for somebody else's.
That's very annoying when that happens. I can tell there's frustration on your end when you're actually building something. Compared to your competitors that aren't really competitors. Just expanding on that, the results on the existing job.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we did some CFD benchmarking, actually. The really shocking thing that we found was the more data we gave it, the more efficient it became. So to give you an idea, right, we loaded up a model with 50 million vectors, right? So that's how it slices it up and makes the model into a full model, right? That's triangle shapes, or rectangles and stuff like that, to work out different areas that you might want to simulate wind over, right? We loaded up one with 50 and one with 150 million vectors, so like a really high accuracy model. Like the sort of things you get in like AutoCAD and stuff like that like proper engineers are using, right? And we found that there was only, I think, 8 seconds difference between running 50 or 150, because when you're dealing with quantum, it's not about just the data size, because with quantum and its inherent way of doing problem solving, you could theoretically hit on the problem being solved sooner than expected.
Mm-hmm.
With traditional, you very much can calculate how long something's going to take to run and give an estimate of when it's going to give you the right result. Quantum kind of throws a spanner in the works.
Yeah.
It really does, because
things are measurable, and this is
well,
starting to
we
get
use a state of superposition.
Yeah.
So, it can be 0, 1 or -1, right? Because obviously it's not just a 0 or 1, but it can also be any state in between those numbers. So of course, you got very different factors to map out that. So what we're trying to do now is showcase all the different options that we can do, because the more we show, the more people can open up their ideas and thinking of how to run stuff in quantum. But fundamentally, like, we want to showcase the service. Like, we're so excited about what we've got, right? Everyone can see our excitement when we're on, streams or doing product reviews and showcases and stuff, right? And we're always very naturally very, very excited with what we're doing and what we're showing off. That's because we truly
have something,
believe in what we're doing, and know that we've got something there that works.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about things being, even sooner than expected. I mean, that leads very nicely on to the next question, which is we've touched on this sort of language learning models.
Yeah.
What are some maybe unexpected future applications you think that this could be applied to, that even you're not applying to, but you would like to,
I mean, stuff with space classification really interests me at the moment, like star cluster stuff and kinds of thing around deep space, because obviously that requires huge amounts of compute to actually calculate those things out, right? We know that JPL, or Jet Propulsion Laboratory for NASA, use already a quantum algorithm for orbital trajectories and insertion burns to actually do that, because it's more efficient to do it in a quantum space. So I'd love to see us do a little bit more research out there. It's something that we've actually got on the roadmap internally, that we would like to do some showcase pieces around it. But also there's energy research that's very interesting as well, like research into dark matter and the 0-point energy states, and there's some really crazy concepts with the Large Hadron Collider that could be super interesting for Dynex to get involved in. We would love to get like an introduction to the guys over at Large Hadron Collider. I love what they're doing over there. Like, the research is so cutting edge. It would be almost a match made in heaven, right? Like, cutting edge research in energy, cutting edge research in quantum, working together to come up with some new crazy concepts that move the understanding on in science. That would be a win-win for everyone, right? Not only us as a company, but humanity in general. I
was thinking even these space companies that are huge at the moment, obviously. Elon Musk company, the Virgin Media guy, they have big public listed companies as well. They could easily be collaborating with you, and this is you could be integrating with so many billion and even trillion-dollar companies pretty soon. So that's very crazy to think, but it's definitely true. Well, tell us about the decentralized proof of work. What is that? How can you be decentralized, and then also how do miners get paid?
Yeah, sure. So obviously we briefly touched on it in our rundown, but so we run what's called a layer 1 network, right? What does a layer 1 network basically mean? So there's many different layers of a blockchain, right? You've got technically there is layer 0 as well, but let's try not to get it too complex very quickly, right? But layer 1 is your top tier native coin or token chains. Then you've got layer 2, which are other tokens or coins on that layer 1's chain. So you're effectively having more than just the native running on there, you're also running layer 2s. And now they're even working on layer 3s, which are, again, a sub layer to layer 2s. So that would be a coin running on a layer 2, which in its own right runs on a layer 1. So it just goes up the list. But with us, we also do obviously proof of work mining. So what does that mean? Basically, people who have leftover processors and graphics cards can put together what we call a rig and mine Dynex, right? Not only does that mine, it does also the proof of useful work, like I said earlier. And what that allows them to do is earn DNX coins that can then be obviously sent over to one of our exchanges we're listed on. And then you can offload that to actual money. So when we say that we're decentralized, our infrastructure is decentralized. Our quantum infrastructure is decentralized. We still run a couple of services that are our own, and there's a reason for that, mainly down to security reasons, because we need to run, things that stop malicious activities, that deal with, providing the dispenser mechanism to pay miners for their jobs. All of these kind of things, obviously, we could run them fully decentralized, but then there's always that risk that somebody could potentially manipulate it if we don't keep a very close eye on certain bits, right? The security system, for example, we've got to make sure it's secure, because that's the one thing making sure we're compliant with the world.
Yeah. That links very nicely onto two really good questions. And it fascinates probably me and other viewers about these graphics cards and actually getting involved, because you're talking about all these different ways, uses of your project. But how many graphics cards is Dynex currently supporting?
So on average, obviously it changes based on the number of miners we have at any one time. But right now on the network, we currently have 131,816 graphics cards on our network.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a fairly large order of magnitude. Many blockchains have said they've got over 100,000. Very few actually can prove without a shadow of a doubt that they have. And we obviously opened up our entire block explorer to also show every connected miner, because of the entanglement. It actually lends itself quite well to a really transparent network, because whatever's registered on one side has to be registered on the other side. So if we can't show legitimately how many exact graphics cards we can put on our blockchain, well, we can from the proof of useful work side. So therefore, we know exactly how many are on our blockchain at any one time. It's quite a unique overview that we offer.
And then added to that, is there a limit does the graphics card have to be a certain have a certain starting point of quality for it to be able to integrate?
Not really. Our network is light enough that we can utilize every part of a graphics card. So if you've got a 5-year-old graphics card, then you can join it on the network and you will get paid some money for the compute. Obviously, the amount of compute it's capable of doing is very much dependent on what card you've got. Obviously, newer cards are going to be able to do a lot more. But we don't differentiate. We don't give priority to high-end graphics cards. We do it's a very random process of what's the closest to that network of jobs that are coming in. And if we're overloaded on that side, we'll bring them in from another part of it. Or it comes down to how the geo ring fencing works, right? So we have the capability of geo ring fencing. We're still finishing up the touches to that, but we're almost there right now. Once that's done, basically, you are able to go, I only want, say, machines in the UK to do the compute for me. So it will pick all the ones in the UK. Now, if all of those cards were really low end, it's still going to use all the UK. It just might take a fraction of a second longer. Or we'll bring on more resources to cover the differential for the fact that obviously they're a little weaker. But we do try and mix and match so that there's always some good cards on there, some really high end cards on there,
Yeah.
and obviously a low end set of cards as well to make it fair. That's the one thing we've had to try and work out is the right way of balancing it so it's fair to everyone.
Yeah, yeah. An interesting question. I didn't think of this, but so back in the day, I mean, I probably got involved in miners and stuff ages and ages ago, and it was almost like better to leave your device and just let it do its thing. Can you go about your day-to-day activities whilst I guess your graphics card is
Yeah,
not rated?
of
Yeah,
course you could.
which is
Obviously, yeah.
yeah,
So you can always stop and start. There's no punishment for turning off.
yeah.
Obviously, you might need to use your PC for a couple of hours. So you shut down your miner, come back to it 2 hours later, turn it back on. That's absolutely fine. Um, from that perspective, we don't punish anyone for turning off because of the decentralized nature of blockchain. Anyway, we expect a certain proportion to be turning on and off, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of miners go chasing profitability, for example. So if we're not as profitable as the next coin, then of course they're going to go chase that profit, but they will come back at some point when we become the most profitable again. But we do have a very big community that is very keen on seeing Dynex succeed. So of course, we haven't seen anything under 100,000 for well over a year.
Wow, that's
So
very impressive.
that shows you how strong the community is with Dynex.
I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, is there? I mean, would there be even a negative because of how efficient you are to be doing multiple tasks on your computer at once, or would you? Because, for example, I have a spare laptop that I'm not even using, has the same graphics card. Very much interested in putting it on, but
Yeah.
equally, I could put it on this computer as well. So, very, very
Yeah,
cool.
and you can just go, oh well, I need my PC for a couple of hours, turn it off. No problem there. And then you build up a load of Dynex, and then obviously when you're ready to go and cash that out on an exchange, you obviously can.
So then let's lead on to the utility of the token. What is that utility? Is it just purely
Yeah. So
to mine?
basically, obviously we aren't a payment processor, right? We're not like Bitcoin, who was touting themselves as the next, fiat, or we're not like Casper, who are chasing blazing fast speeds, right? Trying to rival people like Visa and Mastercard to actually make an actual usable payment methodology.
Yeah.
We are using blockchain as a way to build out our infrastructure. And as such, we need a way to be able to pay our miners. Now, having a blockchain leads itself into nicely having a cryptocurrency attached to that. And with having centralized exchanges, and more are coming on the way each month, or that's the plan. We would give that ability to off-ramp Dynex back to fiat, and then from exchanges you can cash that out to your bank. So that's the way we pay for our services. We don't want to get into the realm of being having to pay miners directly currency, because then it gets into the realm of, are they contractors, are they employees if they're always on our network? So of course that really gray area of blockchain. So rather than that, we use the cryptocurrency, and then it's up to the individual user when and if they cash out.
Yeah. And are they mining just basically Dynex and then cashing out into whatever they want from there?
Correct. Yeah. So we have most pairings with USDT, just because that's the easiest pairing, obviously, that most people use anyway. There is potential that we could open up other pairings down the road, like USDC, for example, because we know that Europe has some issues around USDT at the moment, and unless they are going to get compliant and meet the EU's terms, then effectively USDT won't be able to be traded in Europe. So that might need us to pivot some USDC pairings for Europe. But other than that, it makes it very easy for off-ramping to your own account.
This is clearly like extremely powerful through a network, basically a whole army. as well as the tech itself. Is it dangerous in the wrong hands? Can you talk about, obviously, your head of security, and you have a
Oh,
great security background, which is very encouraging,
yeah.
and
So
maybe the KYC protocol as well, perhaps touch.
yeah, so let me start with the KYC part first because that's the shortest part. The next one's going to be a bit longer. But so we got heads up that there were some new rules around compute and AI processing, right? That in Europe, which states anyone using over $600 worth of compute, there or thereabouts, or 600 euros,
Mhm.
basically has to be
KYC.
KYC'd.
Yeah.
It's a legal requirement, and therefore we need to be compliant. So we introduced KYC. We've got some people that are part of our company who are very familiar with KYC requirements and fulfillments. One of them is our managing director. She's very familiar with KYC and the requirements.
Mhm.
Same as our leadership team. There's at least 4 people on the leadership team that know and understand KYC very, very well. So that part was pretty much a given that we were going to need to do KYC, given that we've got enterprise level customers coming on board. That we need to make sure that if anything's impacted, we've got accountability. From a legal sense, from a ethical sense, from all sorts. However, we do, and that leads on nicely to the other side of it. Is it dangerous? Well, I mean, anything's dangerous in the wrong hands, right? A pencil is dangerous in the wrong hands. But you'd like to think that the people that are running it are responsible, right? Can't think everyone's dangerous because otherwise nobody would leave their houses. But yes, we run a very, very unique security system, and that's probably where my background comes in. That ended up being that way, but we run a very much a traffic light solution, right? So if it's green, then the job can be run. If it's orange, it gets sent to our ethics committee. And if it's red, then it gets rejected immediately. Now, what are the different requirements for each? That's something obviously we're not going to talk all about because we don't want to give away to anyone how to get around it. Although it's not that easy. But basically, if it's an orange level worry, like as in an issue, that it could be potentially malicious, and there are things that can be done that are totally above board and legal, right, that could be triggered for so-called malicious activity, right? Because we don't look at every job that's being run on our network, right? That would be an invasion of privacy. But what we do is we look for digital fingerprinting on the network. So everything that's run leaves a digital fingerprint. You just got to know where to look. So because we built the technology, we definitely know where to look. And therefore we can digitally take fingerprints of how that job was. So, for example, if someone was trying to break a password, right? Now, technically, breaking a password is against the law, right? Especially if it's for malicious purposes. But there are certain criteria that could be potentially absolutely viable to do.
You might be working for a government. It might be for a government agency who are trying to get through to a terror. Yeah, exactly.
Correct. There are always exceptions to rules, especially when there are such wide varying ranges. And that's why we needed the ethics committee, right? We couldn't do this on our own. We would be too biased. We need somebody that is a third party neutral entity, and that's what Dynex Moonshots is. Now, even though it has the Dynex name on it, it is run as a separate business. We have no control over what Moonshots does. And that's for a very good reason, right? The ethics committee has to be above reproach. It can't be bent to our whim whenever we want it to be. We have to let them do their job. So if they say no, then that's the ultimate answer. And we accept that.
It's a big it's actually quite a big point because sometimes cracking a password or whatever it might be, you don't know the full story of that picture, and whilst it might not even be it might not be fair on the individual or whatever it might be. It just it could be.
Correct.
I'm just going through my head where basically you can push a button and get into
Yeah.
anyone's device, anyone's computer, get to their whatever it
With
is.
enough understanding of the system and enough coding expertise, sure. But that's what that security system is there for.
Yeah.
Right? And we want to be the first to set certain standards around how this kind of technology should be used, right? Because having that kind of capability just because you can shouldn't mean you do.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I play. You might laugh, but I play a video game. I have played a video game where basically you've got 3-pin code and a 4-pin code, and the difference in time is like half an hour to break a 3-pin to 4 hours to break a 4-pin. Whereas if you've got your tech, you could just go bang, done straight away, which is very
like a few seconds to do that.
very
it's only four digits, right? If you were talking 26 million digits, then obviously it would be practically impossible for anyone to do in their own head.
Yeah.
It would take some serious time probably for a computer to do it. When you can break up that job into many different slices and then run it over a really big network like ours, suddenly what is hours turns into minutes, if not seconds.
Incredible. That's really highlighted the power of, even those, the capped score and things like that.
And we're forever adding new fingerprints to that service, that security service, right? As part of my job to do. Is to, think outside the box, think of all the ways that somebody could misuse the system and abuse the system. Put stops in place, and then anything that's unknown is immediately checked by the ethics committee anyway, because we don't take any risks. Right. Doing crypto and blockchain is risky enough for us. We don't need to be adding in, unsupervised quantum machines to the equation, because that will get us a lot of problems very quickly from a regulatory standpoint.
You might even see, super, I guess, paranoid people about their privacy going back to physical stuff because they're just so, afraid of where this tech could go in the future.
There's a big thing about how, having this much capability probably is better in a company's hands than, say, military aspects or political, because we're trying to do it justice and do it right. And if we set a standard, then effectively we've shown the right way of doing it. I think that's a much better way of doing anything, right? It's like when we first bear witness to a proper true AI. Do you want it to have military aspects? Do you prefer it to actually learn from somebody who's got some morals? Do you know what I mean? Like,
100%. I totally agree.
That's where it gets really grey.
Yeah, and I think the only way to now make viewers calmer is to say basically, well, someone's going to get there first. Therefore, you just got to hope it's the right sort of people who.
Correct. There's every chance, right? We saw it with atomic research, right? That it was only after they dropped the bomb that they started work on actually how to power something with atomic stuff. The first application was military use, and that's not good. That's not what we want to see, right? Progress as a species comes from us pushing the boundaries. Like, reusable rockets were a thing of only science fiction 10 years ago. Now look at us. We watch SpaceX bring those rockets back almost daily these days, and they make it look so easy. And it's just become normal. Yet 10 years ago that would have been absolute magic.
You said disruptive tech. You weren't obviously joking with people. This is extremely disruptive. So what's your business model? How do you make money? And do people need to buy crypto to run the job?
They don't have to buy the crypto side. That's the benefit of that fiat on-ramp, right? But it's always nice if if you just want to run a quick job and you know that you're not going to need an entire month, you can just run a job and pay in Dynex. That's always nice, right? Especially if you know that it's going to finish in 5 minutes. Why bother paying for an entire month, right? So I get it. It opens up avenues for both options. Developers are going to love it, because developers won't need to potentially spend huge, vast sums to develop programs for clients on our network, because they might only need to run it 4 times to know that their code works, and therefore then they can build the rest of the solution around it. Of course, that then is a lot cheaper for the developer to have to deal with, and then obviously that company can then sign up for a subscription in their own right. So it really does lend it depending on which direction you want to come from. In relation to obviously getting into the crypto side, right? Obviously we do have a crypto service. It's not something we're not making people aware of, right? We're just we decided that the business model of what we're doing made sense to split our business profile, right? So we have a website that's specific to the crypto services. We have a website that's specifically aimed at enterprise services. The reason for that is just that the wording, the terminology, the figures and numbers and things like that change depending on the side, right? So, for example, the crypto people aren't probably going to need to know the intricacies of running CFD or the real intricacies of running protein folding. Right, they just need to know that it's supported, right? Whereas the enterprise side needs that more deeper dive because they're usually coming with tech guys in the meetings and they're wanting to know a lot deeper than what your average day user is. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have developers on the other side of the equation in the crypto side, right? That's where I came from. But obviously the enterprise side is really tailored around big businesses using our service.
Yeah. And then just doubling down on basically how you make money is through subscriptions.
Yes.
You've got the crypto. Do you take a commission on any of these?
Yeah. So you asked how we make our money. So we actually posted a picture. I'll make sure to send it to you. Of how we distribute our money that we make from the subscriptions. So 70% goes to the miners. You've got 10% for the Dynex holder initiative program, which is us giving a rebate of funds that we earn back to our community. It's not staking. Because you don't have to tie in anything or lock up any funds.
Staking has a lot of bad
it's not
as well.
Yeah,
so
it's not
really,
staking.
really
It's just for people who got in early and want to not even touch it for a while. They can earn a little bit extra on it, and that's a rebate. It's not done as an APY or a percentage. It is a proportional share of a 10% rebate. And then obviously we've got 2% goes to our Dynex Moonshot Foundation to help fund their projects, and 18% comes to us. So, and all of that is marked on our Block Explorer as well. It's totally transparent what we earn, how much we've earned, how much we've distributed out, and how much miners have made.
So that's answered that question very well on your end, and obviously very, very profitable. For the user, what would you say the minimum number of jobs they would need to do to basically be profitable themselves? I mean, it then becomes extremely profitable for the user.
I mean, that really depends on quite a few different factors, right? Like how much are they paying in energy rate? Are they solo mining or pool mining? And there's 2 different factors for that. Solo mining obviously is all on you. If you're pool mining, you're grouped in with everyone else and you get a proportional share of that block you find. So it really depends on quite a few different factors. But right now, if you've got 10 cent electric and some pretty good graphics cards, you'd probably be profitable. But then obviously that changes on a day-by-day basis. But the biggest thing for us is that we're pushing those rewards into our blockchain now. They went live a couple of days ago, and we only expect that to increase. So the more clients we onboard, the bigger those fees get. The bigger those fees get, the more money everyone makes from us, right? For that infrastructure side. Obviously, then you've got price appreciation of our cryptocurrency. If the price goes up, then proportionally what you've already earned will be worth more. But we don't word it in that way anymore, because obviously for us, you guys provide us infrastructure. We are paying for our infrastructure to do it. So it's like you being a small data center to us at that point, right? And we can pull from tons of different data centers, all different resources. So I think, you know, the best way to explain it is that we value our infrastructure people, right? We value our network contributors massively, because without those, Dynex wouldn't exist. Right, especially in the light that it is today. Right? So, you know, we're always very happy about the fact that we have a very strong community.
And it's a very large company and project already, and you kind of need that to build this network. And
we're up to about 50 staff now, so I mean, it's not a small company.
Being so large, you're kind of looking at other listings. These exchanges have, you know, companies smaller than you, way smaller than you on them. Do you think, you know, Binance, Coinbase, and other exchanges will have you soon?
Well, that's what we're aiming for, right? So a lot of people always ask us when the next exchange listing is. The problem is, even if we get a listing guaranteed, we still don't know when we're going to get listed, because once they've said, oh, we're going to list you, it's really on the exchange's terms and time frame, right? So our last one took 6 months to get over the line.
Wow.
No reason why, just
not your fault.
That was their time scale. And what we've found is the bigger the exchange, the bigger the backlog of work they've got, right? So, you know, a really big exchange like a Binance or Coinbase, depending on how difficult or easy it is for them to implement, depends on how fast they get it up and running. Like we've talked to, or me personally, I've talked to at least, I don't know, half of the top 25 already crypto exchanges about Dynex. So obviously they're in fairly a very wide range of statuses right now, all the way from like early talks to quite progressed. But then once they've signed and they're on the dotted line, we can't say names, dates at all. We can't because that's part of the agreement. And I know that frustrates many people in our community.
Milestones and stuff.
But once we're tied in with a contract, there's nothing we can do at that point, right? We have to wait. I would love nothing more than, you know, tomorrow to wake up and the top 5 have all listed us. That would be fantastic. You know, could it happen? Absolutely. Will it? I suspect we'll never see all 5 sort of list us in one day. They would probably stage it. When one sees that they're listed, they'll stagger, and then the next one will realize that, and it'll just stagger off. So but I would love to see them all support Dynex in the future. That is one of my ultimate goals, is to try and get all the top, you know, 20 exchanges to support us.
And we've touched on, you know, even competitors in the space with what you were saying about the Q score capping out, no one else has. Would you say there are any competitors? Are there any even rising up? It sounds like you want to work with.
I mean, we've seen a few. I've actually spoke to a few. I would love to see more pop up, right? Competition breeds innovation. For us, we don't feel that we are worried about it. In actual respect, we encourage more to come into the space, right? The more of those companies that pop up in the industry, the more that it's going to be universally adopted, right? The more that people will focus on trying to get those room temperature quantums and systems like that. So of course, we actually would love to have other people, mainly because also if you look at previous history of companies, right? Generally, when it's a company of only one in that same industry, there's room for complacency. We never want that, right? We pride ourselves on really working 24/7. Dynex's staff base is stretched over such a wide range in time zones that truly we never close. So of course we want to keep that pressure up, and sometimes you need competition to keep that drive going forward, right? So I would love to see other companies pop up in the industry.
Do you have some immediate catalysts that you're currently working on that people are really excited about?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a couple that are coming very soon. There's a couple of projects, showcase pieces that we're going to showcase very soon that will get some real big attention. I can't say too much at the minute because obviously I don't want to spoil the surprise. There's a couple of things that I would say showcase really big things, like really, really big things. I think when our LLM goes and launches, probably by the end of the year, I suspect that's going to be a big catalyst because suddenly all the chat GPT guys and the people around that sort of industry will be able to use Dynex as well. And that's going to be huge because
Yeah.
as we know from other like OpenAI, for example, they've had to spend how much on expanding their network again recently? Like crazy money. They're spending like 500 million a year on expansions just because they can't keep up with demand.
It's crazy that they get the funding for this when there are alternatives that are way better. It's just probably lack of knowledge, and therefore,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy.
Mainstream adoption is important if we're
Yeah,
going to prove that this is viable, and that's what
yeah.
we're aiming towards, right? That's
Mm.
one of the reasons why 3D got involved with Dynex and started the talks with Dynex. It's why we spent 6 long weeks of lots of meetings going through the basics so that we could understand what benefits
Mm.
from both sides, and
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
a wonderful time chatting with Sheldon and 3D about what Dynex has got coming. And now Sheldon's joined our advisory board, so
Wow.
that's super. I'm super keen on seeing where that leads to because Sheldon's a man with many contacts,
Hmm.
and a very busy man at that, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely.
But like that kind of partnership, that's where we're looking forward to because we don't announce many partnerships. You probably took a look and
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
we don't do many partnerships. There's a reason for that. We only want to do partnerships that have mutually beneficial for both parties.
yeah,
Because if it's one-sided, then there's always that risk that one side becomes complacent. We don't
yeah.
want we want it to be mutually beneficial. So,
Mhm.
like recently, we announced a partnership, well, about 6 months ago now, with Octaspace, a decentralized rendering system. And the partnership has been very fruitful because we're able to, you know, have our devs talk to their devs and vice versa for ideas and help. And we've expanded sort of like to the point where we can have regular conversations. We do AMAs together. We help each other out, and it's been mutually very beneficial to us. So when we announced our collaboration with 3D, and because obviously 3D was investing in us, it just made a lot of sense to bring Sheldon on as an advisory member. And
Yeah, and I know you make a good point about not collaborating with unless they're the best of the best, which obviously 3D are. Presumably they are or are started to make introductions to some really interesting companies that
oh
that
yes,
integrate to. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. We've been talking for a while now. Um, Sheldon and Jackson have been fantastic with us. Really, really super, excited for what Dynex is doing, what we're bringing to the table. And, this was just the next logical step. I genuinely feel that, that this was exactly where it was heading anyway, the moment that we started talking, because we just realized that what 3D does with investments into disruptive tech and with us being disruptive tech, it was kind of a perfect match.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, they're great contact to have.
Yeah.
And then linking to sort of that feeling of the future. Where do you see yourself in 5 years of all these collaborations and
Oh,
stuff? It's
that's
it's
one that I enjoy answering, but
yeah,
it's
it's
always
bigger than the
like
catalyst question,
the
I
only
think.
problem
Yeah.
is, right, that I love answering this question, but it always leads to even more questions.
Yeah, we'll try.
So I
This
mean,
is the
I would
longest
love,
interview I've ever
yeah,
done, but yeah,
yeah. I
it's
mean, I would I
worthwhile.
would love nothing more than to see us properly mainstream, right?
Mhm.
Like being adopted for actual use on a quite a large scale.
Mhm.
Because like I say, this time last year when we were really testing the scaling, like we really scaled it big, and we know that we can handle it. So I would love nothing more than big mainstream adoption by some large businesses, and we're already working towards that now. but a more regular mainstream adoption, like we know, is going to take some time, right, to get that new concept through to people and help them understand what it can do for them. But I genuinely feel that in 5 years, if we make a success of this, the sky's the limit effectively for us. Like, what will we be doing?
Yeah.
Like, what sort of things will we be getting into? Like, are we going to be dealing with space technology? Are we going to be dealing with full-blown sentient AI? Like, we could be a big catalyst for a lot of it if everything goes to plan. Right now, obviously, I always like to put a caveat on that, you know, everything that we plan out might not necessarily go to plan. Right? We might make a catastrophic choice in a decision, but that's part of the growing experience as a business, right? You learn by your mistakes. We don't make that mistake then twice. So, you know, we've already made some mistakes. We've very much been very open about that. And, you know, we will continue to be as transparent with everyone about, you know, the good and the bad, right? Another question I always get asked is whether everything can be run in quantum. The answer is no. You know, I'm very honest about that. I could lie and say, yeah, of course, we could just run everything, but there are limits to what quantum's there for, right? It's not an all general purpose processing unit like a CPU is in a PC. It is more an optimization problem, a really big mathematical problem, some, you know, chemistry problems. It's very much for problem solving. But that doesn't mean that you can't have some fun with it, right? So
Yeah.
I'll send you some examples after this of, like, how about going to have a game of Sudoku? But instead of doing a 9x9 Sudoku, let's do a 16x16 Sudoku, or a 50x50 Sudoku. So it gets really big and really complicated, right? And let's finish it in a split second of what a human could do, because it's just the whole concept for us is to open people's minds up to what quantum is possibly able to do going forward.
Just picturing, you know, imagine the mining, people doing jobs, everyone making money, every exchange has you. And then when you talk about all these use cases, there are so many, and so many that would benefit mutually. And like you said, like something might not work and not work as expected, but only one really has to come off, and then it's just a slam dunk. It's kind of very likely to occur. But yeah, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on. This is certainly the longest interview, but there's a very, very good reason for that. This is an amazing project. So thank you very much.
No, honestly, thank you very much.
Cheers. Speak soon.